My name is Daniel Fogel. I'm the Vice President of Content and Community here at Recruiting Daily. And before we get started, I'd like to just quickly review a few housekeeping items and let you guys know how you can participate in today's session. First off, all attendees have joined in listen-only mode and will not have the ability to speak directly with our presenters during the webinar. We do encourage everyone to ask as many questions as you have using that question pane that you see on the right there. Just type in your question, click send, and then at the end of the presentation, we do have some time set aside for a Q&A session with the presenters, and we're going to be taking as many questions as we have time for. Anybody who has a question or a tweet, I'm going to try to make sure we get an answer or response for you. So definitely feel free to let me know comments, questions, anything that's going on. I want to hear about it. Feel free to use our hashtag. It's hashtag #RDaily on Twitter, and then look for us to be tweeting along as well from the handle at Recruiting Blogs. Second, you guys have joined today's webinar listening through your computer speaker system by default. So today's presentation is just going to be heard directly through your computer, kind of like a YouTube video. If you would prefer to listen to the webinar using your phone, simply locate that audio pane on the right side of the screen again and click Use Telephone. You'll see a dial-in information and access code are going to be displayed, and you'll use that to call in. I'd like to take just a quick moment to acknowledge JobVite for sponsoring today's content and say thank you for your support of this very important topic. But at this time, it's my great honor to introduce you to our very special guest presenters and a couple of friends of mine, John Whitaker and Pamela Teagarden, and tell you just a little bit more about them. John is recognized in the human resources community as an innovator and provocateur. His blog, HR Hardball, is definitely one of the most visible and popular sites for really honest and transparent discussion on challenges that are being faced by HR professionals. He's also a featured contributor over at Fistful of Talent and does quite a bit of tweeting as well, so definitely check out his work. Pamela Teagarden, founder of Authentum. She started her career as a banker before her postgraduate work in corporate behaviors and positive psychology gave her a front row seat at the intersection of business and behaviors. But she has a lot of information, a lot of research, a lot of education at her fingertips. A fantastic resource if you guys want to reach out and you have questions about any of this content. Always willing to meet you and have a conversation. So really, really great presenters who are here to kind of help us out today and share their perspective and experience with us. But John, Pamela, thank you so much for being here. Members, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our guest presenters.
Thanks, Daniel. A little bit more background here that I think shows once again that truth is stranger than fiction. One other thing about Pamela, or Pammy, and I, we've been kind of collaborating with some stuff here the last couple months again, but prior to that, we hadn't spoken to each other probably in, I'd say, 20 plus years, but we went to school together from 7th grade on. So we were both Texans. We both went through the rigors of middle school, high school together, and then went our separate ways. But then it's kind of funny how you reconnect. But one of the advantages of that we're reconnecting now, we're pretty polar opposite. I'd say we're on the other one or the other extreme about how we communicate. You're going to get a lot of really good scientific, professional sounding, granular information from Pam because she's done some amazing things while she's been over in Europe the last 30 years. And me, you're going to get some snark, I think some simple solutions that I've tried to enact, and also I will act as an unofficial interpreter for Pam because she does tend to talk at a level that sometimes it's like being one of the guys that's holding the ropes when they launch the hot air balloon. I'm just holding it down, man. Trying to keep it together. So what we're going to do today, hopefully, is take a look at the job of being a recruiter. We want to talk about how there is more science to it than art now, and we have a situation. I don't think anybody here is going to hear their situation not described. It might be different sides of or different extremes, but where we are right now is we are gatekeepers in a sense. Where we are going is we need to align the candidate needs of those, not only or align the candidate's needs with the needs of the organization. And how we're going to get there is going to take a little bit different methods. And Pam is specifically going to talk about some of the psychometric things that she's developed to help us get there. But in a nutshell, I think, Pam, you can go to the next slide here. I want to talk about this term gatekeeper because I think traditionally that's sort of the visual we have. We can be somebody who is the entryway to an organization, and that can mean a few different things. We can be somebody that's trying to lure people in. We can be somebody who's trying to prohibit people from getting in, or we can be somebody who's selling quite maybe, I don't want to say inauthentically, but we do. We will do things to get people in the organization. We are the conduit from which person gets to A to B. And I think one of the challenges we have right now when we're talking about where we are is we still have the same job I think we've had for many, many years in that gatekeeper role, but we're asked to do more now for both sides of that fence. You know, we've long had a situation where we have two separate masters, two separate clients. They're very well defined. We've got the candidates and we've got our internal clients, our hiring managers. And if it comes down to it, if we have an either-or type situation of who is going to get the brunt of our time when things get overloaded, we default to the people who are paying us before we default to the people who might need us. So Pam, if you want to roll through this here a little bit, and we'll talk about some of the different images of gatekeeper.
Thanks. Who knew in the 7th grade that you were going to grow up to be somebody that was so good at me? So I appreciate you yank me from my academicness if I need to, because I can be way too close to my research. But I care deeply about this industry. I've been fortunate enough to serve as faculty to the Global Thought Leadership Institute for Talent Acquisition. And in that role, I heard the word gatekeeper so many times. Matter of fact, I fancied it would make a pretty good drinking game, because it would have been the party of the century if we could have heard this word and every single time somebody would, start the party. But as I was thinking about what happened when the word gatekeeper occurred, I'm a visual person, and it brought up some images for me. I have a question, Daniel. I'm getting feedback on me. Are you able to hear me?
I'm muted.
Hear me?
Yes, sorry, we were having a little bit of an echo. If we've got the presentation on speaker, that might be the echo we're hearing. Okay, Pamela, go ahead now.
Muted.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Unmuted.
Pam, we can hear you. You go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry about that. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, as I'm sitting there listening to all these workshops, and they bring up the word gatekeeper a million times, I get some images, and I'm looking around the room, and I think, what kind of gatekeeper is he, and what is her world like? And some of the images aren't what they want me to think about, but it's stuff that we actually do in the recruiting field. And so when I look at somebody and I feel like they're kind of, really sort of a St. Peter's-like gatekeeper, looking at the holy, sort of the pearly gates and saying, only the divine and fortunate can come in to this heavenly place. And I see a few, bouncers, step away from the red rope, I'll take you and you, but not you, you or you, and you have to go home and figure out why. And even if some of the nicest people are under pressure, they might not mean it, but I have a feeling there's a bit of a bouncer mentality. And then finally, something that I know Johnny kind of was talking about, my favorite movie ever is this picture, but the idea that there are many times when we may feel a bit like a used car salesman, where that gatekeeper mentality comes out in a, new and improved, greatest job ever, drive the business in so many ways off the lot, and it just seems kind of a little bit like a slimy sales pitch sometimes. And so it's not all good, these images of gatekeepers. And so it's interesting to me that most of the time people talk about gatekeeping, they're telling you what they mean. But I really love it when people can come up with their own images and understand from their own idea or ideal what gatekeeper means to you, to your role. Because this is the most important spot you sit in. It's where your pressures are. It's where your limitations and constraints come to you. And it's also where you have a spot you can look forward and see the opportunities to make your role into something amazing for the next phase of the business. So we need to actually understand the image you have for gatekeeper. So I don't really want to poll anybody, but it would be fun if you have like a chat bar at the bottom. If you think of like a word or a phrase that defines gatekeeper to you, I'm hoping you'll take just a second and set the stage. If you feel like sharing it, it'd be great. Daniel can collect them and we can shout out some words. Sometimes I think humor is fun to move through some of the ideals that we have in our head. But the idea that we're setting the stage, and keep that thought top of mind for the rest of the webinar, because it'll help you understand your own personal journey. What is gatekeeper to you? Beyond being a gatekeeper, I want to talk about the gate too, because you have a sense, does your gate, shut and lock? Do you open it one way? To my mind, I think you probably have a gate that swings. You can open it one way and then the other. And I guess the biggest, sure that we give you some thoughts and include some information that will help you so it doesn't smack you in the face, because that's what we don't want to happen to your role, is that you also are pressured at this spot and squeezed. So with that, I will hand it over to Johnny to talk more about what's on either side of the gate regarding the role.
Yeah, this is the part where we get real. we're sitting in the middle, and for those of us who've been in recruiting for a while, I think we've seen some things change. It's funny because we have a great sponsor today, for instance, JobVite, and they're an example of the technological advances we've had in our profession that allow us to throw huge nets out and to have in many respects easier access, or at least broader access, to candidate pools. What we have, though, so these candidates on the left-hand side, we have a limited space for imagery here. You can see that we've got 4 pickets over there. There's like 2 million pickets. But our responsibility is, all right, so we're going to serve these candidates. We're going to figure out who they are via CVs. We're going to try to get references, and we're going to figure out why people like this person. We're going to try to do our due diligence. We're going to try to talk to them. The organization, on the other hand, what they want data. They want to know how things are going to fit in with the way we do business. That includes, you're hearing more and more about culture. We want people to fit into our culture, which is, we have some. We're going to touch on some of that today, but God knows there's material for a whole series of talks on culture in the organization. But where we are in the middle has complicated itself a great deal, because the expectation has always been there to serve the organization. If I know from my hiring managers and from my corporation what they want, I can narrow down the pool, and then I'll interview them. I'll give them a call. How you doing? Let's talk. But what's happened is the expectation on the left-hand side of the fence here, candidates, has grown exponentially. Not only the number, but the way that they're to be treated. You've probably heard the term candidate experience 100 times by now. I happen to be a big believer in it, and I think that anybody who has been in the job search, if you've been in a job search yourself lately, you could probably speak to this. A lot of times the candidate experience now is so far removed from even being able to speak to the gatekeeper that we've got a serious disconnect. But on that other side of the ledger, the organization, that's fine and dandy. I know you've got to help serve the candidates, but we still need somebody in the role. We need them quickly. So we do have some problems in that. We've got a problem that the hiring managers actually think. There's a poll run by ICIMS, was an organization that ran a poll, said 77% of hiring managers think that the pre-screening done by recruiters is inadequate. To which my reply is, you think, that probably that I have, tell me if this rings true for any of you out there. One of the last few contract gigs I was working, they determined that the adequate, efficient, ideal workload for a recruiter is, say, 15 open requisitions, maybe a high of 20 that you can juggle. And even that's pretty substantial, depending on the level of position. Well, the same company that determined this had an average workload per recruiter of 43 requisitions. So you're saying to yourself, we know you're in the middle, and we know how you can keep that process going. You can, the efficient and ideal way to serve both of your clients here, but we're really going to triple your workload. And I think a lot of recruiters find themselves in that role. We become very transactional in that sense. And I think the strength of what we do is far, far more than transactional. And what happens, we get into this either or. I mentioned this before. We get into an either or type situation where we think, okay, well, I'm being paid by the right side of the fence here. I know who's paying me. And as much as I want to do some of these neat things like have in-depth screening or to build a passive candidate pool beforehand or to do some outreach, to do some source resource, fact of the matter is we need to get butts and seats a lot of times. And so we sacrifice the left side to serve the right side because we're looking at it on the single continuum here. If we service one more, like if we start being more candidate friendly, then we're not doing what our clients want. And if we're totally focused on what our clients want, we might get butts and seats, but we've completely disengaged our candidate pool. That can be a tough situation. And I think we can look at it a lot differently. I think, first of all, this single continuum, I think is something, it's a mindset we got to get out of because it's not really accurate anymore. What we have instead is we have two continuums. It's not an either or, it's an and. Okay, so the expectation from the organization is that we will service them to the best of our ability. The expectation from the candidate is we will serve them to the best of our ability. We will keep them engaged, we will communicate with them, and we will make the candidate experience, if not enjoyable, at least professional. And I think that's a reasonable expectation. The problem we have, again, is we might not ever be able to balance that, and I think that's because we're looking at it in terms of balance. Pam, what do you have to say about balance?
The world of the organization is that business is changing in unprecedented ways. So you've got thousands and thousands of new candidates, but you also have, a business that's changing in unprecedented ways. So not only is that continuum infinite from both sides if you use and, but there's just no way to balance it. So, it fares to go to your point in the next slide about who you are at the gate. Did we lose you, Johnny?
Yeah, this is my part of the science. This is my thing where I try to sound scientific because, we can't balance it. And you saw that last picture, I think, kind of represents this as a fulcrum. This is how I look at our job. And I've been pushing this little theory for years now. It's a basis of a lot of what I talk about. It's a basis of a lot of what I write about. This is Newton's cradle. And you've probably seen it growing up. You've seen it, maybe not even knowing what it's called. But it's the ball clicker toy. My dad had one on his desk. A lot of people keep them up on their desk. It's fun. It's irresistible, actually. But if you look at it, and we watch this thing in motion, the middle ball, I think, is a fairly good representation of where we are as recruiters. We are that middle ball. And if you look at the balls on the end that are swinging, that are coming up and coming back down, we're getting slammed from both sides here. That was actually the epiphany for me, is seeing, kind of getting it from both sides, just go, I'm sitting in the middle just getting hammered on both sides of my head here. But it's not as apparent as it seems, because that is not a motionless object there. What the middle ball does in Newton's cradle, and it's a great exhibit, it's a great illustration of basic physics and the laws of motion, is it's channeling energy. It's continuing. The actions of one go back and they cause a reaction of the other. It's not a one-sided affair. That ball on the left, when it comes down, is not going to go unreciprocated on the right side. So we are in the middle, and if we're performing ideally, efficiently, this is the model for us. We can get both sides going back and forth in perpetual motion. We can channel the energy back and forth. If you're rolling your eyes right now, I understand. First time I told this to my wife, she thought I was nuts, but now we have a couple of these around the house, and it's kind of funny to talk about it. But this is a pretty good illustration of not just recruiters, but HR in general. I think a lot of you can relate to this. We get it from both sides, employees and managers. But this is how we're not necessarily trying to balance, we're trying to leverage. We're using the energy from one, we're using the experience of one to service the other. And in my experience, what we're trying to develop now, a few of the things I'm working on, is trying to make that process possible by managing both sides of the equation, specifically maybe the candidate side more, because that side of the equation, something needs to be done to make it more manageable for the recruiter if we're ever going to leverage that. That was my science part of the program. So now where
Shall
are we
I
going?
take over on the leverage point, Johnny? Basically, my research had to start from scratch. There was nothing I could think of that wasn't an insane outcome, you know, where you do the same thing again and expect different outcomes, you know. And so I thought, I've got to start this research with a beginner's mind, because I've been in this business for 20 years and stuff isn't working. Business is changing in unprecedented ways. People are coming at us in droves. Something may need to just be rejigged completely. So this is the part where I'm going to take 2 slides and walk you through a future that could happen now. And this is also the part where I've worked for 6 years on this research, and I could go too fast or too high, and you know, that's where my translators come in. So I hope to show you just a piece of what we could do if we actually leverage versus balance. So when I started as a beginner's mind in looking at this, I looked at the 2 perspectives of work. There's the organization and there's people. In your case, it's candidates. So there's no coincidence. These are the 2 sides of your fence, and so I looked at them in depth to see, pretended I didn't know anything before, and you know, and started from scratch to figure out how could I gain some effectiveness for you, but make it really efficient, because you cannot just keep adding more things to the left and more things to the right, or you're double counting everything. So I looked at, on each side of your fence, what are the outcomes that we're trying to get? Regardless of what tools we use or activities, what do we really, really, really want? And I chose the term really, 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 because that meant I could get all the way down to the granular state. For the organization, they have 2 needs. They want somebody to come in and perform in this team and do the things that make profit, and they want somebody to hang around and be a part of a culture that will drive performance. On the candidate side, they want to do a role that they know how to do, that they've done before, that they're interested in, that they have the skills to do, but they also want to belong, and so they want to be a part of the culture. So these were my 4 points in looking at the research as a beginner and trying to find where we could leverage. So I thought there's a ton of stuff that's being done to simplify and make more effective the collection of skills and interests and the performance metrics, and that's pretty measurable, so I'll stay away from that. I'm kind of interested in the idea that culture shows up on both sides. That could be a really interesting point to find some effectiveness and efficiencies. I won't say I was wrong, but I literally went crazy with all the definitions of culture. So when I dug into this, I won't call it a waste of time, but I really learned a ton about how many ways we define culture. And this is going to be part of your problem, because we have 2 definitions, one on either side. Your people, your candidates, are getting their brand culture from the websites they go to, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, their friends, your advertising. They want to skip around the halls at Zappos because they read the book about happiness. They know that your company stands for that kind of culture, and that's what they want to join. On the other hand, your organization has an ideal culture. May or may not look the same, but I bet it's on a poster somewhere in your office. And if you're sitting at your desk, turn to your poster, because I'm going to lay odds that there's a word like teamwork, accountability, excellence, customer service, integrity. These are big, giant, bland words that are wonderful for brand and all of that, but they're very difficult to define. So I started getting in this big muddy mess trying to figure out how we could make culture more efficient and more effective. So I thought, okay, I'm going to hang on to that for a second, because it could be cool to know a little bit more about culture. But actually what I kept coming up against is you have no idea if either of these cultures actually exist. They are aspirational on both sides, and so it's going to be really tricky to play in that field. So I'll hold on to that in a second and come back to culture. I thought, let me go into these 4 pieces that I have, 2 on either side, and let me see what is the priority on each side? If they had to choose between one of these two outcomes, what would the candidate choose? What would the organization choose? What would they really, really, really need? From the candidate standpoint, they would love to do their role, but they can do their role anywhere. They can be an accountant in many places, but they want to join your company because of the fancy chef, the cool way in which, you know, your branding occurs, the book on happiness, whatever. They want to belong. And so they have this sense that they want to be engaged and do their role, even if it's an nth degree separation. The organization side, they want you to perform. They'd love for you to be a part of the culture, but there are some exceptions in all cases that, you know, we'd love for everybody to teamwork except for that guy in the pharmaceutical company that cures cancer over in the dark room. So if there are exceptions, culture can't be the major priority. Performance is. So you've got the person who speaks to the heart, wants to belong and do their role. You've got the organization that needs the performance and then has this ideal culture that should bring more performance. So I actually looked at these two definitions, engagement and productivity, and I thought, there's our leverage point. If I can leverage that for recruiters and sit that at the fence, at the gate, then I can really help, you know, the flow of all these candidates into the right positions. So let me show you what I mean. The first thing that I had to do is realize that I wasn't going to be able to get everything I wanted from traditional psychometrics. You all know a lot of them, and frankly, I think they're awesome. I am certified in about 35, 40 of them just because I needed to learn them all.
Muted.
Someone's personality is something, but it's very hard to translate that into work. You know, you're going to hire this person because they're an extrovert. Are you going to bring this person in because they're a woo on StrengthsFinders? These are fabulous things to know about a person, but they may not make your job more effective and more efficient. Not saying they're not good, but I had to find a way that would talk to both languages. So I found an assessment. I unveiled a language that actually combines engagement and productivity. It was used in the entrepreneurship field. And so I took a tool that had been used for many other reasons and sort of repurposed it, I guess, to sit in larger organizations. And so in my research, I was able to unveil something that already had been validated. So in order to understand this, let's just think for a second. I'm not going to be able to explain, maybe Daniel will have us back someday, I'm not going to be able to explain the 9 billion factors that went into creating this, but let's just talk about it simply. You want to know two things standing at the gate, at least. I know there's more than that, but the first thing you want to know is, how does this candidate choose to work? Because they're going to come in and have to work. Then you're going to want to know how the work needs to be done, the position you're filling. Can I get someone who chooses to work in a way that will actually perform in the way the company needs them? And it's funny because intentionally ordering your preferences at work is the foundation of engagement. And it was funny that I started thinking about my research in such a hoity-toity academic way when I was writing my paper for, you know, with APA formatting. But my 13-year-old niece asked me, what was I researching? Why did I spend all this time, you know, looking at employee engagement? And I thought, I was like silent for 30 seconds when I looked at this 13-year-old and thought I'd scare her away from work if I opened my mouth. And I said, you know, Sophia, I actually figured out a way, I think, that people can do stuff the way they want to at work. And she was precious. She went, of course, well, nobody wants to do stuff they don't want to do, and nobody wants to do stuff that somebody else wants them to do. And I thought, that's it. If I know how people choose to perform and the performance that needs to be done, that's the quick apples-to-apples conversation that needs to happen at the gate. So I'll show you. First thing is, I might have begun to explain that the idea is effective, but it has to be efficient, so it better be quick. So it's literally just a questionnaire like you're used to. You're going to give somebody a couple of minutes to fill out some questions, and you're going to see how they choose to work, and then you're going to be able to compare it apples to apples to the work that needs to be performed. So I'm just going to sit here for a second before I move on to the CVs and all the other tools you have, because this is where the real filtering comes in to make your job a little bit easier. There used to be this commercial that this person had an egg and said, this is your brain, and then they cracked it and they threw it into a pan and said, this is your brain on drugs. This is your brain on business, is what we're measuring. So we're not measuring personality, behavior, skills. We're measuring the mindsets that underpin performance. And then we're comparing that to the performance. And that's why it's apples to apples. McKinsey did a study suggesting that what's missing in leadership development and other things like recruiting is that we aren't getting down to the mindsets that underpin the decisions made every day, with business changing at an unprecedented rate and people coming in with all these random values. What can we really, really, really do about, making sure that people make the right decisions at work? So this is just a questionnaire. It's just some answers, couple minutes to answer some questions, and you're given a systems language to sit at the gate with you. You learn these 12 definitions, you understand the contextual underpinnings of using them to match, and you get a really efficient and effective way to bridge the gate. But I'm not going to forget that we've got all these other really awesome things, because knowing how somebody works doesn't necessarily mean that their old boss liked them and all the other things that matter. So when we look at the whole pattern of what we got, and by the way, this is the last slide, so stare at this and don't think you're going to go crazy here, because I know that I'm really moving kind of fast and telling you things that you've not seen before. But now that you've got, look on the candidate side, you now have several things that are quick and easy that make a more precise filtering of those people that come in the door. So think about it. If you have 1,000 people who are marketers and you need a marketing person and all of their bosses love them, if we look at how they make decisions and how are they future focused or current focused, those sorts of things about how this performance needs to happen, then we can cancel out a number of these highly qualified candidates, because we can get more qualifications out of understanding how they choose to work. If you take these tools that are sitting over here on the left side, you have who they are, that they were loved, and how they are. So you've deepened the precision in which you can quickly produce a smaller talent pool and a more directly predictive talent pool. Because we can go apples to apples, we know how this fantastic accountant or marketer that's loved by his boss is likely to work. We can then predict that when they show up at the office tomorrow, they're likely to work in this manner, at this pace, with this decision-making style, with this communication style. And that is actually going to mean that you can now recruit for the culture, not to the culture. We don't want another person that the partners all love. We want the crazy different person that we have to get us to the next phase of business, and we want to be able to put them through an orientation that brings them in beautifully for their authentic strengths. And so you're actually now sort of you're the catalyst for the next phase of business, and you're moving the culture forward rather than recruiting to a culture and managing a poster on the wall that you may or may not have gotten the person that has the right characteristics for the role in the mindset category. Now, I'm going to leave it at this for a second, and I'm just going to look at the words at the bottom. It's a very quick way to make sense of both sides so that you have what you need, precision in your candidate selection, and predictive qualities in moving your company forward because of the right fit. Now, this is a huge picture, and what I'm suggesting sort of sits as like a little dashboard of information in the center. This assessment system on engaged productivity sits in your hand, and you can look to the left and use this information for your candidates. Look to the right, and of course, technology can help you, make the matching much easier. But this is where you can, in terms, make your effective and efficient, less insane, hopefully more precise and predictive way forward. So I'm going to stop there and just let you stare at that picture for a second, and then I'm going to turn it over to my translators, because I've only given you a teaspoon of a giant ocean, and they will tell me if I hit any right spots and whether or not there's something that they want me to dig into before I mess up. So Johnny and Daniel, help me out here.
Pam, that was awesome. That's actually the most succinctly I've ever heard you talk. It was great. I do, I have a kind of a strange situation here. I got a question texted to me, and so obviously somebody who's on the deal knows me, and without revealing a name, and here's what strikes me about this model, because it all makes sense, and this is what attracted me to talk to Pam about this, is I like what it's providing me. Because generally what you have, and this is the truth, the organization at the end, and I'm not going to say end of the day, drink. What they really want is performance. You can have great culture, and you can initiate all the wonderful little feel-good things you want, but if the company doesn't perform, it really doesn't matter. But if you start hiring a different type of person based on this other information you're getting, your leaders and the business will become more enlightened, because they will see that is more productive. This is sort of your venue to maybe, I think the overall thesis of this is tying engagement, how somebody wants to work, directly to productivity, and doing it maybe without having to pitch it that way. I mean, this is a tool that you will use. The question I got, and I think it's a fair one from the recruiter side of the puzzle, is that still what it looks like is, okay, now I'm accumulating this information, now I've got one more data point. I've still got 300 candidates. How could I possibly do this to every one of them? It's cost prohibitive and those types of things. Well, and what Pam and I have talked about, and this is where, we're going to call out Daniel and say, hey, you got to have us back, because there's a lot more to this at some point. But that is a big part of it too. You've got to, and I think, in many ways I know how to, narrow down, funnel down, filter down, whatever you want to do, how you want to call it, that left side, that candidate pool, to where they're going to meet a lot of the things that they must have, that they should have, and that they could have before. This is like this is almost like the golden piece of information. This is not only going to tell you this person could do the job and wants to do the job and is maybe ambitious enough to pursue the job. It's going to tell you how they prefer to work. And so I think this completes the picture, but at the same time, it's not going to complicate your workload, because I still think that is a reality for recruiters, is that 23 recs, 25 recs, whatever, 20 to 100 candidates for each rec, if that small, it's just overwhelming. And so you need some way to kind of help you out on the left side. Then you get enlightened with this information, and it moves to your organization. It shows them the value of it, and round we go. And again, this is part of the pendulum, Newton's cradle. This is how you get that reaction to come back, because once they see the value, they want more of it. So Daniel, do you have anything to add to that little
Unmuted.
Plug there?
No, I mean, I've actually had conversations before with you, and it's really fascinating stuff to me. I'm definitely interested in a future-focused approach to recruiting. I think probably in times past where you had people who were just doing the very interviews back in the day that had no sense to what you actually wanted, and moving to behavioral-based interviews. There's a lot of different data that you could track. I think to me, it's really about the evolution of finding the things that are more efficient for us to be able to use and do those going forward. While there might be lots and lots of data points that you could possibly track out there, you could find one or two metrics that show you the clear ROI and are going to make your job easier. There's less for you to have to worry about, and you get better results with doing that. I think that's kind of a slam dunk, and it's one of the things that kind of attracted me to learning a little bit more about this process.
Unmuted.
So where would you like to go from here? Because I did get the one question, and I don't know if there was any others that we got on there. Daniel, you're looking at it, but is there anything that we can address real quick? Because that's another thing we wanted to do, is make sure that we made the most of our time here and didn't drag it out too long.
No, and first off, let's say thank you to both John and Pam for coming on and sharing a lot of this with us. I know it's kind of a heady topic to get your head around, but both of these guys are really great about engaging and being willing to answer some questions. So we've got some time to go through that. Members, if you have yet to submit a question, I would encourage you to go ahead and do so now. Also, you're going to see contact information for these guys at the end of the deck too. So if you need to like reach out and have some other stuff cleared up, if there's something that we can't answer today, or you comes to you later in the day and you want to reach out, definitely feel free to. But I know we got one question that came in from member John. John, thanks for listening today. Thank you for engaging. And I love this hashtag.